Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Dread Time Stories. I'm your host, Dr. Phobia, and tonight, dear patients, I'm going to do a Creepypasta compilation this evening. These are 5 of my favorite creepypastas of all time. I've removed the intros from the actual stories themselves, so this is the only intro that will actually be in tonight's stories. Timestamps will be in the description below, so feel free to skip around to the ones that you enjoy. Now, without further ado, sit back, relax, and enjoy tonight's Creepypasta compilation. There are 3 men standing at the intersection of a sewer. One of them is very lean and very tall. In fact, he looks too tall and seems to sway on his feet, as if ready to topple with the whim of a strong gust. He grips a burlap sack in his left hand. The tall man has provided the firepower. Next to him is a greasy mustache. The mustache belongs to a stocky Mediterranean-looking fellow with shifty eyes. He digs into his backpack with concerned intent. The mustache man has provided the intelligence and the tools. Standing apart from the first 2 men is the clown. Wrinkled columns of green, yellow, blue support an ashen face of sweat and paint. He wears a white clown glove on each hand. Thick locks of crimson explode from his head, aggravating the sweat. His face is on the verge of melting. The clown has provided the distraction, but he does not look happy. The 3 men face a brick wall with a hole in the center. It's less a hole than a black gaping chasm, maybe a couple feet wide and stretching to infinity. The mustache maintains that this will lead them directly beneath the bank. Clown is not so sure. He questions the men's collective planning. Tall man did not bother to load any of the handguns, ensuring them that the show of force will be enough. Mustache has apparently forgotten to bring even a single flashlight and curses. And Clown himself wonders why he chose to dress in full clown regalia before venturing into the sewers. The sewers are filthy, as sewers ought to be. A noxious gas of human excrement floods each nostril with every breath. Layered above this stench is something more, something sickly sweet, barely noticeable, but there. Green light bounces from drainage channels as rats and other scurrying things patter along the rim. Clown stumbles on the walkway in oversized clown shoes. The tall man avoids the sight of Clown. He harbors a long distrust of clowns, a distrust so deep that it ventures into the realm of abject fear. To make matters worse, this particular clown's breath stinks like sour milk. It's nauseating, so he keeps his distance. From the corner of his eye, he sees Clown staring at him. Staring or smiling? Tall man can't be sure in this dreary dungeon, as he too doubts the wisdom of Mustache's plan. Mustache defends the strategy. There were bound to be setbacks, he says, but the hole in the wall still provides the best chance for a clean escape. They will have to enter one by one and crawl on hands and knees to see the other side. Once outside the tunnel, turning around will likely be impossible. Tall man asks how long it goes. Mustache answers it should be long, but not too long. Tall man asks how they're supposed to see anything in the tunnel with no flashlights. Mustache answers that they don't need to see anything, they just need to crawl. All the same, he does have a book of matches, which he offers to Tall man. Tall man interprets this as his cue to go first. Something about the tunnel bothers him, but he would rather get on with it than suffer the continual glares or smirks of Clown. He accepts the matches and faces the hole. A soft breeze and a low howl whisper from the opening. Behind him, Clown stares while Mustache runs some fingers through his namesake. Tall Man teeters for a moment, turns around, and retrieves 3 9mm pistols from the sack in his hand. "Easier if you take these now," he says. All 3 men tuck the weapons into their waistbands. Not weapons, Clown reminds himself. Merely a show of force. Tall Man turns back around. The bricks in the wall are the color of money. The water flowing through the channels is the color of money. Even the stripes in Clown's suit are money-colored. The tall man sees money everywhere, except in that black hole yawning before him. That is the only way to the actual money. Lots and lots of it. The kind you can touch and smell and trade for things that make you happy. Money is the prime motivator for Tall Man. For all of them. It is worth crawling through a slimy, stinking hole, he tells himself. Still, he hesitates. The black circle is so sharply defined it seems to hover in front of the wall, detached from its surroundings. Tall Man stoops and stoops and stoops some more. He stoops down until the black circle frames his face. He raises a wiry leg until the knee can rest atop the lip of the hole, and with a push from the other leg, he slowly enters. Funny, when the whole of his body finally wriggles its way inside, the gentle breeze dies. The low howl changes too. Earlier it was constant, but now it pulses with a rhythm in his ears, low and deep, like a distant generator. The hum, hum, hum tickles Tall Man's brain as he crawls on. The ground is cold, chilling to the fingertips. His knees scrape along the smooth surface. His blind hands grope their way over cement, puddles, slime, and gloom. All around him drip invisible drops. Drip, drip, hum, hum, scrape. The only sounds here in the belly of the sewers, intensified by the lack of visual stimuli. And that word, belly, comes to mind. When that word, belly, comes to mind, Tall Man begins to perceive his environment as a living organism. He feels like an unwelcomed virus invading a host. No, more like a piece of chewed meat sliding down a giant's intestine. Drip, drip, hum, hum, scrape. A symphony of endless digestion. He crawls on. The air grows stale. The tall man's knees are wet and aching. He has lost track of time and can't tell how long he's been crawling. A good 5 minutes at least. Still, there is no light at the end of the tunnel. How much further? He needs to rest a moment. He stops crawling. The air is heavy, stagnant, and waiting. The drips and the humming sound are muffled now. Tall Man retrieves the matchbook and tears off a match. He tries to light it. Nothing. It's a dud. So is the second and the third. Tall Man starts to panic. He wants a scrap of light now. He fumbles with the fourth match, anxiously swiping it along the striking surface. A fizz of sulfur spells success, but the spark of light reveals something astonishing. Mere inches from him stares a pallid face, smeared with gruesome makeup. Blood-red worms burst from the head. No, not worms, but curls of hair. It's Clown's face, lurching from the darkness disembodied, every muscle locked in rigor mortis. The eyes are dim and cloudy, but fixed upon his own. The match throws drunken shadows across the peaks and valleys of the ghostly visage. It alternately smiles and scowls at Tall Man without really moving at all. Tall Man is stiff with incomprehension. Fear tiptoes down his spine and settles into his guts. He feels sick. The two faces stare frozen in silence for a brief eternity. Suddenly the clown's face leans forward and blows out the match. A whiff of sour milk fills the air. The abrupt return of total blackness shocks the tall man's senses into operation. He scuttles backward, away from the face in the tunnel. His pants begin to shred at the knee, but he doesn't care. The only thought is retreat. Faster, faster, retreat. His hands and knees scrape against the concrete. He imagines the clown head gliding silently through the black tube after him, smiling yet scowling. The splashes and scrapes become a frantic staccato as he goes faster and faster. His knees must be bleeding now, but he doesn't care. Retreat, only retreat matters. And then the tall man finds himself falling backward out of the hole in the wall, landing at the feet of Mustache and Clown. Clown, who was in two places at once. They ask what happened, and when the tall man finally calms down, he raises himself on two shaky legs. Teetering, he blurts out his story, but the two men do not understand. Mustache laughs, while Clown regards Tall Man with suspicion. Impossible, they say. You only spooked yourself and was seeing things that were not there. But Tall Man insists that there's a second clown in the sewer tunnel. Mustache strokes his namesake with two fingers. Fine, fine, he says. I'm gonna go through and show you there's no damned clown in there. Tall Man protests, wants to tell Mustache not to leave him with Clown, but keeps quiet. Backpack hoisted onto both shoulders, Mustache scrambles up and stuffs his body through the opening. He begins crawling. His speed is surprising in these tight quarters. They watch his figure rapidly dissolve into the darkness. The instant he disappears from view, the sound of his crawling stops short. After a moment of silence, Clown and Tall Man hear a steady scraping, like something being dragged across the concrete. The sound quickly fades down the stretch of the tunnel. Clown got him! Clown got him! Mutters the wide-eyed Tall Man. Clown is agitated by this and tells him to shut up. Then what the hell was that? Squeaks the Tall Man. What was that sound? Clown doesn't answer. The two men wait there in the sewer for any sign of Mustache. None comes. After many minutes pass, Clown has grown eager and starts to fidget. Enough of this, he says. He must be on the other side waiting for us. I'm going through. The lust for money have clouded his intuition. He remembers he's mildly claustrophobic, but this fact also gets swept aside by the power of greed. Tall Man pleads with Clown not to go, says they should call the whole thing off and leave now. Don't be ridiculous, replies Clown. I'm going through, and you better not lag far behind me. He grabs his matchbook and faces the wall. He struggles with his big shoes, but finally gets a good grip and hoists himself through. The Tall Man does not follow. What greets Clown in the hole are drippy wet echoes and a humming, and an interrupted dark. Clown crawls on. The humming and dripping are hypnotic in his ears. The blackness is disturbingly uniform. It's a blackness smothered in darkness and ad infinitum. It tugs and tugs at the eyeball that would try to pierce it, coaxes it from its socket with false hopes of a murky shape just ahead. The only respite is to close one's eyes, for at least then the smoky phantasms float behind the lenses. This blackness is a solid wall upon which nothing floats, so he closes his eyes and moves forward. Clown wonders if he might meet his doppelganger in this strange subterranean place. He hopes not, and crawls on. Gradually he becomes aware that the dripping and humming have changed. They sound duller, muffled. The air has changed too. It hangs with the dead weight of a dozen corpses, and it sticks to his skin. He crawls on. Clown's white-fingered glove detects a third change. The ground no longer feels like solid concrete. It's softer, putty-like. His fingertips seem to sink into it ever so slightly. When he hears a faraway scraping sound, Clown's eyes snap back open. They throb in their sockets with anticipation, starving for some speck of light to materialize in the distance, but it never comes. As his bloodshot eyes go hungry, his mind wanders. He thinks of the hordes of rats carrying a lifeless mustached body down the tube before him. He thinks of thousands of little teeth gnashing into greasy flesh. He also thinks of soiled clown suits clogging sewer drains. He thinks he needs to stop thinking and start crawling, but he can't. He advances no more than 2 feet before hitting an obstruction. It feels like a wall. He fishes out the matchbook from his striped pocket and tears off a stick. 3 failed swipes later, he tears off another. It ignites on the second attempt and shows him a solid brick wall blocking the way. This wasn't supposed to be here. How is it possible he never ran into Mustache? The sign in the bricks is so unnerving. Clown bangs his fist against him, tries to wriggle one loose. They do not budge. They just stand there in the orange glow, quietly mocking his proud logic, daring an explanation. Clown has no explanation. The match is almost spent, so he drops it and moves backwards. It is the only thing he can do. Progress is slow and awkward. The ground is more malleable than he remembers. It feels like his knees are leaving small impressions behind. He crawls as the tunnel drips and hums at him. When his feet touch another wall, Clown gasps. He draws another match, lights it, and twists his head around to look. But what he sees isn't a blocked path, but an intersection. 2 new passages branch off to the right and the left, where before there was only one straight tunnel. It makes no sense. Then incoherence, anger, and most of all, indecision. Clown must choose a path, but which one? Which one? The right. It's as good as the left. The match dies as he scoots back to face the new chasm, then crawls ahead. The humming, the dripping, the puttied floor, and the breathing. The breathing? Yes, Clown swears the tunnel is breathing now. He can feel the gentle inhalation and exhalation all around him. Somewhere far off, the scraping sound comes again. He crawls and hits his head against another wall. Another match, another intersection revealed. This one looks smaller. He squeezes his way into another right turn. The breathing changes now too, longer and slower. And there's the scraping again, a little closer this time. He crawls, his body sinks into the gummy floor. A few paces forward, another intersection, another match, another right turn. A few paces more, and another. The junctions keep coming, and soon Clown is out of matches. He always chooses to go right, but it keeps getting smaller. At one intersection, Clown turns around to retrace his path and try to find a wider opening. The maze does not care. It continues to breathe and compress. As Clown crawls through the network of tubes, the roof begins to scratch his back. It matches every movement with a downward push, regardless of his direction. Incoherence, anger, and most of all, claustrophobia. Before long, Clown finds himself sliding on his belly. He slithers through the endless corridors, even as they threaten to crush his body. He has to keep going. Keep going. It makes no sense, but keep going and get out. Hopeless. The ground is sticky, and it holds him in place as the walls close in from every side. Clown grits his teeth. Tall Man stands alone at the intersection. He gazes into the black hole in the wall, transfixed. Every muscle quivers with expectancy. Yet he sees nothing and hears nothing, save for a low, steady howl. He blinks, shakes his head, and looks up toward the grate in the high ceiling. A dying sun casts down shimmering modes of dust which drift in odd patterns. Tall Man sways on his feet, covered in filth and bleeding at the knees. That sticky sweet scent from before is stronger now. He turns and bolts out of the sewers. He does not look back. The story does not end there. In the next several years, Tall Man will abandon his life of crime. At first, he will try to make sense of the events in the sewers. He will research a variety of paranormal topics, everything from ghost and cryptozoology to the hypothetical existence of hotspots on Earth where alternate dimensions are said to bleed into another. The search for answers will yield nothing but a growing sense of hopelessness. In a strange twist of fate, the Tall Man will eventually get a job at the very bank he once tried to rob. Before closing one day, he'll be asked to fetch some old documents that are kept in the basement. He will walk down the rickety stairs and search through the boxes of poorly kept files. Amid his searches, he's going to find a rusted iron trapdoor under a box. Curious, he will lift the squeaky door and discover a ladder, descending into a small concrete room. He will feel compelled to crawl to the space where the basement light struggles to reach. Once there, he'll find a bricked-over hole opposite the ladder. The implications will come in a flurry of breathless recognition. "My God," he'll whisper, "at last, the other side." The mortar will be crumbling, the bricks loose. Without quite knowing why, Tall Man will begin to remove them, exposing the black hole little by little. The fear will be gone, replaced by his long-lost thirst for answers. The Tall Man will be surprised to find himself crawling through the tunnel with nothing more but a Zippo lighter to guide the way. He won't remember climbing in. It'll be like a dream, with the dripping and humming ringing in his ears as before, asking him how can he be sure he ever left at all. He will crawl on. It's only when the air in the tunnel becomes laden, and only when the sounds deaden, only when the sour milk wafts through his nostrils, that the creeping chill will return. Then the lighter's timid flame is going to be snuffed out with a sudden rush of wind. Pearls of crazed laughter will erupt from everywhere in the dark and rattle through his skull, so loud he'll have to cover both ears. It's so completely unexpected that he won't be sure if the shrieks weren't his own, or an outright hallucination. Nonetheless, it will be enough to send him scuttling backwards. The tunnel will seem different, sticky, sighing, angry. The Tall Man will feel it contract around him as he moves in reverse, faster and faster as before. Looking behind, he will finally see the dim light of the aperture. It will be closing. At this point, Tall Man's memory will muddle. He'll vaguely recall his escape from the withering hole. It will feel more like being disengorged than anything. A regurgitated piece of meat, he thinks. The tall man will run to the ladder, turn around for one last look, and see something that will haunt him for the rest of his life. Witnesses will later tell him that he ran from the bank screaming a blood-curdling scream unlike anything they'd heard before. He won't remember that part. He'll pray that what he saw was a product of temporary insanity. He'll try to forget the whole thing ever happened. But every time he closes his eyes, every time he dreams, the same image will come to him with terrible clarity. The hole in the wall shrunken to the size of a quarter, from which a single white-gloved finger pokes, squirms, points, and beckons. Do you have something that you truly, relentlessly desire? Despite your state of life, is there something else that you would go completely to the end of the world to get? Well, lucky for you, there's a way to achieve what you're looking for, and you don't need to go to the end of the world to get it. But you will need to go somewhere, and that place may be too out of reach for some. It's not far away, closer than one may believe, but there are requirements that some individuals may not meet. First, whatever it is you seek, know that you must seriously desire what you want. In your eyes, it should be something you need. If you begin the journey without the correct state of mind, you will surely fail, as it will be near impossible to turn back once the journey begins. The second requirement is that you will need a vehicle of sorts. Most use a car as is the most comfortable choice. There are a select few that have used small motorized vehicles, such as an ATV or a motorcycle. But this has been proven quite difficult, as the conditions of the journey can prove to be too bothersome. Do not use a vehicle too large or noticeable, as you will need some of the cover of night to be most safe. Also, while any sort of car will do, you may not want to choose the most expensive or cherished vehicle. You may take your slick new black Mercedes-Benz for a drive if you'd like, but don't expect it to come out in a pristine state. Make sure your vehicle is completely fueled before beginning the drive. The first task to accomplish is to locate the road. It doesn't have a name, it's not on the map, and technically, it doesn't even exist. It will only show up if you're looking for it at the right time, and you will only spot it if you know what to look for. Finally, you must be alone during the journey. You didn't think you'd be able to go with a group, did you? It must be night when you begin. Choose the time of night where you believe the roads will be least populated. Drive to any area that's just a stretch of road surrounded by woods. Here's where you want to start paying close attention. If you're looking for the road, it will turn up eventually, but you need to search for the road's hint in order to pull down the right one. Once you're close, you will see or feel its signs, but what its signs will be will depend on what it is you desire. For example, if you're in search of wealth, you may spot shimmers on the empty branches of trees as if they resemble the shine of gold or diamonds. If you seek love, you may begin to see rose petals slowly dance in the light breeze, blowing in the road's direction. If you seek revenge, you may even get a sense or ever-growing feeling of heat or anger in your body as you approach. Just know what it is that you really want, and you'll have no problem finding the turn. Once you're sure you've found the revealed road, take a deep breath and turn onto it. At this point, you officially started down the nameless road, which brings you through 11 miles leading to whatever it is you seek. Each mile will test your desire, and it will expose if you really want what you're searching for. Before you go any further, stop the car and be wary of a few advisements. Do not turn on the radio during the drive. Do not use a cell phone during the drive. Reception will be cut off anyway. Do not open the windows during the drive. Make sure they are closed before you continue. And if you're riding in a vehicle without windows or a top, then prepare for the worst, as the odds are heavily against you. Do not attempt to leave your vehicle at any time. You'll never want to exceed 30 miles per hour unless you're desperate to make it through the section of road. And most importantly, as with any drive, buckle up. Feel free to prepare and make sure you're ready. Once the road has been entered, time has stopped, so you don't need to worry about losing the night. Though you may not notice, you're actually not in your own world anymore. Take one last moment to realize that once the first mile is over, there's no turning back. If you ponder turning back at all, know that you shouldn't even be on the journey in the first place. Once it's all done, continue on the road. On the first mile, you won't see much change. The road passes through mostly woods, with a few miles being an exception. The air will turn a bit colder, in which you should turn on your heating system if the vehicle has one. You won't want to take your eyes off the road later. Take some time to calm any uneasiness by admiring some of the night sky. You'll see it completely lined with stars, more than you ever thought possible. If the weather was cloudy beforehand, you'll also notice the sky is now clear. On the second mile, the air will become colder. This is the primary reason why traveling in an open vehicle is very difficult. With each mile, the air will drop in temperature even if the season should be warm. If the air is too cold to bear, even with the heat on, your only option is to speed up. With each mile, the road also becomes more complex, taking more turns and showing an increasing amount of road hazards. Be sure to always keep focused on the road in front of you to avoid as many bumps or obstacles as possible. Hitting a few rocks or potholes won't hamper your process too much, but you'll want to keep in the best condition for as long as possible. If your vehicle is forced to stop because of damage, then there's nothing left for you to do but eventually freeze to death. On the third mile, you may begin to spot silhouettes of human figures in the linings of the trees. Pay no attention to them, even if they seem to be getting closer. It will be hard to resist peeking at their unnerving, distant appearance, but know that they will reveal themselves later. At this mile, the road will become dirt, even if you weren't driving on it in the beginning. Keep to the center of the path, as it will become narrow and wide at random intervals. On a quick side note, should you ever attempt to turn around, despite previous warnings, you'll be left on a path which never ends, and you'll simply run out of fuel eventually and be left to freeze in the cold conditions. On the fourth mile, you will not only see more of the figures, but you will begin, in a sense, to hear them. In the back of your mind, a very faint, unintelligible whisper will echo. These will come and go, but you cannot stop them. If they become bothersome and distracting, try and tune them out by thinking of what it is you desire. Attempt to listen to them and determine what the voices are saying will only attract them to you, and you want to be as far away from them as you can. They'll be closer, so there's no use in bringing them in this early. On the fifth mile, you will come to a clearing. The lining of trees to your left will disappear, revealing a lake with no end, a beaming great moon over the water. The illumination from the moon will be so spectacular that the vehicle's headlights will no longer be required. Restrain yourself from gazing at it. If you look at its light for even a few moments, the road in front of you will end, throwing your vehicle into the water, which you will freeze in mere moments. The voices will be gone for this mile, but don't rejoice yet. They'll be back. On the 6th mile, take into account that you're more than halfway done. Despite the progress, you may lose hope here. The stars will have disappeared at this point, leaving the sky an empty, black abyss. The clearing will have ended, leading you back into the woods. The only light you will have provided by your vehicle's headlights, but they will flicker from time to time, even if you're sure they're in perfect working order. If you have a radio in the vehicle, it will turn on here automatically. Even if it didn't beforehand, it will produce an overwhelming screech that will send you off the path. A calm voice will then begin speaking about your greatest fears and what it is that you are horrified of in your life. It will speak in a way that will cause you to visualize the words in your mind, so don't listen to it. If you begin to comprehend what it's saying, the horrors will prove too much for you to stay on the road safely. Attempting to turn off the radio will provide no use. Speed up if you need to. Just keep your mind off the voices as much as you can. As you approach the end of the mile, the voices will fade out of the speakers, leaving your ears at peace for now. On the 7th mile, the voices from the figures will return, and they won't sound like a whisper this time, but more like distant screams, growing closer with every second. At some point on this mile, you'll hear one of them in your ear as if one of them were right behind you. This is because one of the figures has found their way into your vehicle. Don't turn around. Their face will shock you into paralysis, leading you off the road. If you don't draw attention to it, it will become uninterested and hopefully leave. These beings are said to be the ones who have traveled down this road before, but were not successful. They live the remainder of their existence suffering in the darkness, with their only goal to bring down other travelers with them. It is said from experience that these beings can't physically harm you, so as long as they don't cause you to wreck, you should be fine. On the 8th mile, slow down if you're going too fast. The road here takes very sharp turns, which if overshot will throw the vehicle into a pit through the trees. The cold is near fatal here. If you were to have a glass bottle of liquid in your vehicle, it would be solid in seconds. The heating system will have become completely obsolete. Your headlights will flicker more, sometimes shutting off for a few seconds. You should take a break if this happens, but do not completely stop. The figures will be following you at this point, and you shouldn't stop for too long, because they will surround your vehicle and trap you. More of their screams can be heard from outside your doors, sometimes even sounding of maniacal laughter. Their hands will claw at your windows, desperate to reach in and feel something living. Do not look at them. They won't block your windshield, and the last thing you want to happen is to crash and be trapped with them. If you don't make it from here, pray it's the freezing that ends you. On the 9th mile, your vehicle will stall. The headlights will shut off, as will all other systems inside. There is nothing you can do to prevent this. What you will need to do is close your eyes and immediately attempt to restart the vehicle. Keep your eyes closed, as the figures will have surely surrounded you at this point. The starting of the vehicle will frighten them, and they will back away temporarily. This will give you a chance to start moving forward again. If you hear the windows crack from their struggle, don't lose focus. The beings can alter the vehicle, but remember, they do not have enough strength to physically affect you. You will hear nothing but their voices rampage in your mind, as if they could be anywhere between a dozen or 100 of them after you now. Once you start the vehicle, floor it. Floor it as long as you can stay on the path. When the mile's done, the beings will retreat. On the 10th mile, the voices of the beings will stop. If you were to look in your rearview mirror, do not actually do this. You will see them following you, but not as if they were chasing. They're watching you, as if they're seeing you off. As you go down the 10th mile, the road will become smoother, as if you're back on the 1st mile. The figures will be lining the sides of the path ahead of you. They won't be after you, but they'll watch as you pass. Some have theorized that the beings are impressed here, that you've come a long way on the journey to what you desire. This is false. They are not impressed. They're happy. They're happy that you are about to approach the next mile. They are happy because you are most likely going to your death. On the 11th and final mile, everything in your vehicle will lose power, as it did on the 9th. The vehicle would normally be immobile, but you will start moving. An unknown force will be pulling you forward. In the darkness, you will see a glow of a red light up ahead, as if it were a light at the end of a tunnel. Close your eyes and cover them. Do whatever it takes to make sure that you do not see what you're about to go through. Covering your ears would also be helpful, but keeping your eyes covered should be a higher priority. The red light is another clearing, but there is no moon or lake this time. Once it's entered, unrelenting and inconceivable noises will sound from all directions. No amount of bravery and conditioning will spare you from these sounds. The cold will turn to a merciless heat, burning all parts of the vehicle. You will feel the illusion of the flesh being burned off your bones, that every part of you is being destroyed as you travel through the screams and audible suffering. As long as you keep your eyes closed and resist the urge to see where you are, you will survive through the suffering. This will last a total of 31 seconds, but many fail to keep their vision closed during that time and are left to the worst fate of the road. Where is this mile located? Those who have survived do not know. Some named it the transmission from hell, but whether it's a part of hell is debatable. After the final mile, power will return. Stop the vehicle. Take a moment to possibly regain some of your sanity. Let the screaming in your ears begin to fade, and know that you have nearly completed your journey with the hardest task overcome. Breathe and begin to drive forward once again. After only a kilometer, your vehicle will arrive at a dead end. Stop, and do not attempt to move again. Nothing will happen right this second, but do not be disappointed. Relax and close your eyes. Imagine in your mind what it is you desired the whole time. It will most likely stay the same as when you entered, but sometimes this desire may change through making this journey. Think about it as what made you go through such a terrifying and difficult means to acquire, and imagine possessing it in your hands. Once you finally visualize this, slowly open your eyes, and you will find yourself at the beginning of the unnamed road where you first began. This may confuse you, but know that you are finished. Your task is done. Your mind will then turn to your reward. If what you desired was material, check the back seat of the trunk, if the object is larger. If the object was small enough, it might already be in your pocket. If what you desired was non-material, then do not be disappointed if the change is not immediate. Turn back to where you came from, and you will find in your life what you have wanted is there. You may find the love of your dreams. You may have gained unnatural, unimaginable power. You may have your most hated enemy, the most satisfying revenge possible. You will have no doubt gained what you deserved. So now that the task is done, what's the catch? Is your vehicle cursed? Is there something you're about to lose? Is your death imminent? The answer to all is no, of course. You've done the challenge. You've proved that you're worthy of what you desire. As stated before, the sounds of the 11-mile will continue to exist in your mind, potentially causing you to have some vivid and unusual nightmares, but these should prove to be nothing compared to what you've gained. Now, one last question. Is there something else you desire? Are you not satisfied yet? After all, you're left right back where you started. The road is right in front of you. So, are you up for another drive? If so, buckle up and just move forward. About 5 years ago, I lived downtown in a major U.S. city. I've always been a night person, so I would often find myself bored after my roommate, who was decidedly not a night person, would sleep. To pass the time, I used to go for long walks and spend the time thinking. I spent 4 years like that, walking alone at night, never once had a reason to feel afraid. I used to joke with my roommate that even the drug dealers in the city were polite. But all of that changed in just a few minutes, one evening. It was a Wednesday, somewhere between 1 and 2 in the morning. I was walking near a police-patrolled park, quite a ways from my apartment. It was a quiet night, even for a weeknight. Very little traffic and almost no one on foot. The park, as it was most nights, was completely empty. I turned down a short side street in order to loop back to my apartment when I first noticed him. At the far end of the street, on my side, was the silhouette of a man dancing. It was a strange dance, similar to a waltz, but he finished each box with an odd forward stride. I guess you could say he was dance walking, headed straight for me. Deciding he was probably drunk, I stepped as close as I could to the road to give him the majority of the sidewalk to pass me by. The closer he got, the more I realized how gracefully he was moving. He was very tall and lanky and wearing an old suit. He danced closer still until I could make out his face. His eyes were wide and wild, head tilted back slightly, looking off at the sky. His mouth was formed in a painfully wide cartoon of a smile. Between the eyes and the smile, I decided to cross the street before he danced any closer. I took my eyes off of him to cross the empty street, but as I reached the other side, I glanced back and stopped dead in my tracks. He had stopped dancing and was standing with one foot in the street, perfectly parallel to me. He was facing me, but still looking skyward, smile still wide on his lips. I was completely and utterly unnerved by this. I started walking again, but kept my eyes on the man. He didn't move. Once I had put about a half a block between us, I turned away from him for a moment to watch the sidewalk in front of me. The street and sidewalk ahead of me were completely empty. Still unnerved, I looked back to where he had been standing to find him gone. For the briefest of moments, I felt relieved, until I noticed him. He had crossed the street and was now slightly crouched down. I couldn't tell for sure due to the distance and the shadows, but I was certain he was facing me. I had looked away from him for no more than 10 seconds, so it was clear that he had moved fast. I was so shocked that I stood there for some time, staring at him. Then he started moving toward me again. He took giant, exaggerated, tiptoed steps, as if he were a cartoon character sneaking up on someone, except he was moving very, very quickly. I'd like to say at this point I ran away, or pulled out my pepper spray or my cell phone, or anything at all, but I didn't. I just stood there, completely frozen as the smiling man crept toward me. And then he stopped again, about a car length away from me, still smiling his smile, still looking toward the sky. When I finally found my voice, I blurted out the first thing that came to mind. What I meant to ask was, "What do you want?" in an angry, commanding tone, but what came out was a whimper, "Wha?" Regardless of whether or not humans can smell fear, they can certainly hear it. I heard it in my own voice, and that only made me more afraid. But he didn't react to it at all. He just stood there, smiling. And then, after what felt like forever, he turned around and very slowly started dance walking away, just like that. Not wanting to turn around to him again, I just watched him go until he was far enough away to be almost out of sight. And then I realized something. He wasn't moving away anymore, nor was he dancing. I watched in horror as the shape of him grew larger and larger. He was coming back my way, and this time he was running. I ran too. I ran till I was off the side road and back onto a better lit road with sparse traffic. Looking behind me then, he was nowhere to be found. The rest of the way home, I kept glancing over my shoulder, always expecting to see his stupid smile, but he was never there. I lived in that city for 6 months after that night and never went out for another walk. There's something about his face that has always haunted me. He didn't look drunk. He didn't look high. He looked completely and utterly insane. And that is a very, very scary thing to see. I should probably start by telling you a little about myself. I'm 19 years old. I live in Pennsylvania, and I guess I've always been a creative person. When I was little, my parents would remark about what a vivid imagination I had. For the most part, my childhood was normal. I liked drawing and writing and hated math. I had trouble making friends, so I played with my imaginary friends. We would play games out in the woods. I always liked playing with these friends because I knew I could trust them and control them. I knew they would never hurt me, not like the other beings that I thought up in my head. Or at least, I think they were in my head. I used to have a lot of trouble sleeping at night. I would always get out of bed and get snacks, or watch TV, or play with some of the cats my family would rescue. You see, my mom was a veterinarian, so she would take in stray cats, nurse them back to health, and then adopt them out. It drove my parents nuts for me to stay up that late. Everything was fine until one day, when I was about 9 or so. I was up late at night, per usual. I was playing downstairs. I was playing with the most recent rescue, who we called Jacob. What? Or were you expecting Fluffy? For whatever reason, I was drawn to the large glass door leading out to the backyard. I would normally never go outside at night, and the curtains covering them were always shut. This night, however, I felt the urge to go outside. I opened the curtains and was almost expecting to see someone or something there, staring in. But there was nothing. I started to feel a bit braver, so I opened the door and stepped outside, Jacob in tow. This is when things got bad. See, behind my house is a large field, and past that, a forest. None of that was visible. We live in the middle of nowhere, so there were no street lights. Nothing. Only empty space. And for this reason, this empty space was calling to me somehow. I walked to the abyss. I felt a breeze against my face, which smelled like honeysuckle and sage. I kept walking until out of the darkness, I saw something walking toward me. It was glowing a pale white. My first thought it was a ghost of some sort, but this was different, more physical. It had a vaguely humanoid shape, but where the eyes were, there were only black orbs on this pure white form, almost like it was absorbing the darkness. I wasn't sure if it was getting closer or bigger. I finally broke out of my trance and ran back inside, slamming the door behind me. I took a breath and then was drawn to look back outside. It was there, right there, staring in. I shut the curtains and ran back, screaming to my room. My parents woke up and found me in my room. They yelled at me for being up so late, and how my dad had to be up early in the morning. I, however, was just glad to be alive and safe. Jacob was gone forever, consumed by that thing. When I told my mom the next morning, she said I was probably tired and imagined it, that Jacob had ran away when I let him out, and then we would see him again. When we didn't, she tried to tell me that he must have found a home. I knew she was lying. For a while, that was that. But ever since, I have always made sure that all the curtains are closed after sunset, and to never go out after dark. I went away to college a year ago, and came back for vacation. A few nights ago, while at home for Christmas break, I decided to go out and have a smoke, momentarily forgetting my childhood experience. The air was freezing cold, but the cigarette momentarily warmed me. It formed the only light in this darkness. But soon it appeared again. I ran back inside just like before. Since then, I keep having nightmares that I will look out a window and see it. Its black, shadowy eyes, its all-consuming body. I'm starting to lose the ability to tell my dreams from reality. I just want to know if what I saw was real, if it's haunting me, or if it's marked me in some way. My friends think I'm crazy, but do you think I'm crazy? When I was a kid, my parents had a creek behind our house. It was pretty close, so every day of summer vacation, my brother and I would walk to it. We'd skip rocks, or we'd make sandwiches and camp out until supper. Sometimes we'd bring our rods and go fishing, though we never caught anything. Just little skinny gray fish that really weren't worth keeping. However, we never went swimming there, except for one time. It was during the first week of summer. I had just finished middle school, and my brother had just gotten out of the 4th grade with all A's, and my parents were exceptionally happy with us. Saturday came around, and when the clock hit 8 a.m., I woke up my brother, we put on our swim trunks, and headed down to the creek. It was a beautiful spot. The creek's bottle green water danced and shone under the mid-morning sun, and we could feel the soft wind brushing past us. On either side of the banks were old willow trees with long, thin branches and flat green leaves that hung down like dog's ears. We peeled off our shirts and plastered on the sunscreen. Even at that early hour, it was already getting warm. My brother didn't bother to change into his swim trunks. He was so set on getting in the water first that he just tore out across our camp on the riverside and pitched himself into the water, completely bare-ass naked. I hobbled and staggered towards the water, trying to put my trunks on and pull them up, yelling at him, "Get back here and put on your trunks, Roger." "I don't need 'em," he yelled back as he floated on his back, just like an otter does. "What if something swims up your pee hole?" I managed to get my swim trunks on just in time to hit the water. It was quite a jarring feeling the coolness of it that engulfs you after the sun beats down on your back. I just bobbed up and down just as he spat a mouthful of water right into my eyes. My brother floated there and laughed as I splashed around blind for a second, and when my vision cleared, he was already out in a deeper part of the creek, diving down and coming back up again like a dabbling duck. "I bet I can touch the bottom. What about you?" "No, I'm fine," I said. "Come on. You scared? I can do it." "Fine." I drew in my breath and went under. Under the water, everything was murky, green and black, with the sunlight stalled at the surface like a frightened camper with a lamp. I swam down past the fallen branches and the freshwater weeds, and with a shaky hand, I touched the soft silt of the creek bottom. I pulled back, leaving a palm print in the worm-brown riverbed. As I prepared to swim back up, I saw the outline of a huge fish. It was at least 4 feet long, with a sloping head and wide fins. It drifted around me for a few moments before darting off. I came to the surface, gasping for air. My brother was grinning wide. "See? Isn't that fun? Now watch me." I told him to wait a minute as he cocked his head to the side like a confused dog. What? I told him about the fish. His expression didn't change. So? It's a big fish. I bet I can catch it with my bare hands. Before I could say anything else, he was under the water. And a minute later, he didn't come back up. Roger? I called his name over and over again. I was screaming it loud when he finally shot back up with a clump of river moss on his head. I'll admit, I jumped a little. I scared you, he laughed, taking the moss off and throwing it back into the water. Don't do that again. You were really scared. I thought you were in trouble, you idiot. I had to restrain myself from punching him at that moment. Well, geez, I was just joking. He looked sullen for a bit. Then he was right back to grinning like a clown. Hey, I'm going back down. I bet I can catch that big fish. Before I could say anything, down he went. And a few seconds later, he bobbed up and was screaming, Something bit me! Roger, that is not funny. Just as those words left my mouth, I noticed a cloud of red that was expanding in the water around him, and my heart stopped. I swam over to get him, but out of the corner of my eye, I saw a dark shape in the water, curving back toward him. I grabbed him in one arm and took off towards the shore, swimming harder and faster than I ever thought I could. Roger was thrashing about and shrieking like a dying bird, and my ears were ringing. Every so often, he would cry out even louder, and I would turn back to see that thing in the water right on our tail. I could see its face in the water. The edge of the creek seemed to move away from us. Finally, we reached land, and I threw him onto the grass and climbed out. My arms and legs were aching down to the bone, and my head was pounding. My brother was shaking and completely silent. I looked him over and saw a patchwork of shallow red wounds where he had been bitten. My eyes followed them down to his right calf, and I nearly threw up when I saw it. On his calf, a golf ball-sized chunk of flesh was bitten completely off, and the wound was deep red and oozing. I snatched my t-shirt and wrapped it around the wound. The rest was superficial compared to it. We threw on our clothes and staggered back to our house. When we got inside, I told my mother everything, and her face turned so pale. She didn't even yell at us. My father told us never, ever to go back down there again, but he didn't need to. My brother did not speak. Even when we were driving him in the car to the hospital, he was dead silent for the entire trip. When we got to the hospital lobby, everyone in there just stopped and stared at us. Or rather, the blood-soaked t-shirt wrapped around my brother's leg. A nurse ran up to us and told us that my brother needed to go to the ER. The words emergency room prompted an outburst of dry sobbing from my mother. My father was stone-faced, and my brother was still shaking and looking around like a caged rat. He got taken in for surgery. A bald-headed doctor came out and described the damage using words like skin graft and eviscerated tissue. I didn't know what those words meant at that time, but I had a pretty good idea. The doctor cleared his throat. Also, we need to know how he was injured this way. My mom looked at me. I told him about the fish and how it had chased us until we reached dry land. I could tell from his face that he really didn't buy it. Are you sure it wasn't some kind of other animal? There aren't any fish around here that can make that kind of wound. My father looked down at me. Was it really a fish? I knew what I saw, and I told him as such. The doctor said, Well, we checked the wound, and there were indentations around the wound that looked like human teeth. Are you sure the boy's brother didn't bite him? And my father's hand balled into a fist. The doctor saw the look in my dad's eyes and immediately backpedaled. I'm just saying, because the bite marks were consistent with human teeth, and the boy's been saying Josh over and over again since we put him on anesthetic. My father's arm dropped. My son would never. The doctor apologized and said I would have to have a plaster mold of my teeth made and take a psychiatric evaluation. Just in case, he said. I couldn't believe it. I looked at my father and he just sighed and consented to the evaluation. For 3 hours every weekday for the rest of the month, I sat in a bleached white room and answered questions given to me by an older woman in Coke bottle glasses and a calling, condescending voice. My answers felt completely irrelevant. Did you ever have violent tendencies toward your brother or other people? I said no, and she asked me to think harder, try to remember everything. She would second guess everything I said in the tone of voice you talk to a dog with. It was embarrassing. Being told to answer honestly and then being told that your honest answer wasn't consistent with your honest answer the day before, or that you should think more clearly about your honest answer. I was eventually cleared. Even with the plaster mold in my teeth, I still feel I probably wouldn't have been if my father hadn't walked in on us one day with a newspaper in his fist. He slapped it down on the psychiatrist's desk and opened it to a page that said, "Local fisherman catches river monster." The lady looked at my father. My father looked at me. They knew I was right all along. And oh, how I wish I wasn't. The fish was laid out in the pictures. It had the same sloping head and broad fins. And at the bottom of the picture was its open mouth. It had a row of square, flat, human-looking teeth that were stained pink with blood. My brother recovered well. He still has a scar on his calf and walks with a slight limp, but the real damage isn't what you can see, like the nightmares. He would turn and writhe in his bed like a snake on fire, and his sheets would be damp with sweat. They were always silent nightmares, except for this one time he woke up Mom and Dad. He didn't even know he was screaming. He told them that the fish had come and dragged him down the bathroom drain to the deepest, darkest water. Then the fish would eat him alive, tearing him open like paper and eating his insides as they slid out of him into the icy blackness. Mom put him on some sleeping meds for a while, but that didn't help much at all. In my second year of high school, we moved away, and that seemed to help more than anything. The nightmares stopped, and he settled back to his old self. He still would not get in any water, not even swimming pools. Once we were at the zoo, and the aquarium, and the sight of an alligator enclosure made him run back towards the bird exhibit. I don't remember where that creek was exactly, but I'm fine with that.